We are live with Glen Merzer, who has written an extraordinary book, Food is Climate. Every leader needs to read this right now. We are in a crisis. Why should every single decision maker on the planet read your book, Glen?
Well, Jane, we've been misled. We've been told for decades now that the problem with the climate crisis is just the burning of fossil fuels. That is part of the problem, but it's the smaller part. So we need to focus on the larger part of the problem. And the larger part of the problem is animal agriculture. Estimated in this book to be at least 87% of greenhouse gases coming from animal agriculture. And that's based on a paper, published paper, peer-reviewed paper by Dr. Silas Rao. And the reason that most estimates that you come across of animal agriculture to greenhouse gases are more like 15% is they do dishonest accounting. For one thing, they don't include carbon opportunity cost. That's the cost of the foregone sequestration. If on all the grazing land of the planet, and that's more than 1/3 of the planet, if we weren't grazing animals and we restored that to forest, we look at how much carbon dioxide that would sequester, well, that would take care of the problem, essentially. So the solution to the climate crisis is to end animal agriculture, rewild the grazing land, and protect the oceans from industrial fishing. And if we do those things, we could solve the climate crisis. We're never going to solve it just by moving to electric cars or using solar panels. Those are good things, but they're a small, small part of the problem.
So, first of all, I want to ask you, do the leaders, the best and the brightest, which I always point out was a sarcastic title, the best and the brightest brought us the Vietnam War, do the best and the brightest, the leaders, the powers that be, whatever you want to call those who make decisions, do they know this? And are they simply ignoring it? You mentioned Al Gore. You mentioned Bill Gates. Bill Gates recently publicly called for Western nations to switch to synthetic meat, which, in my opinion, was sort of his nerdy way of saying, go vegan. Synthetic meat is plant-based meat. And so why is he included in this? Because he's
in his book, which is a bestseller on the climate crisis, he says, should we go vegan? And then he says, no, that's not realistic because eating meat is too important to our cultures. It's very important for holidays, he argues. In other words, on July 4th, he just can't imagine that people could have plant burgers instead of hamburgers. Now, that's a lousy reason to destroy the planet. You know, if he put 1/1000th of his money into advertising that we should have plant burgers instead of hamburgers on July 4th, that would help solve the problem. So he should put his resources to work to help solve the problem. And, all we would need him to do, for example, would be to buy up ranches and rewild
he's
them.
already one of the largest, if not the largest, private landowners in the world.
Well,
he owns more farmland than almost anybody.
He should buy up cattle ranches and then let them be rewilded.
He's bought them. He's one of the largest private farm landowners in the world.
Yeah, well, if he owns cattle ranchers and then they're operating as cattle ranchers, he's not doing us any good, is he?
Well, what I mean is he owns farmland, and a huge percentage of farmland is growing crops to feed farm animals. More than 75% of all the soy produced is going into farm animals. A huge percentage of the corn is going into farm animals. People don't realize this. Even people who fight world hunger don't realize that a good percentage of the food that we're producing isn't going to feed people, it's going to feed animals. Why is that such an inefficient food source? And why is it that we need to transition away from it? Explain, because one of the problems is that people don't explain properly in simple terms, without gigabytes and all of these phrases that nobody understands. In simple terms, like you're talking to an elementary school child, why animal agriculture is contributing to climate change. We're talking to Glen Merzer, the author of the stunning new book, Food is Climate, a response to Al Gore, Bill Gates, Paul Hawken, and the conventional narrative on climate change, with a foreword by Philip Wolin. Explain in simple terms for those listening and watching.
Well, there were two questions there, Jane. One question is, why is it inefficient? We would have about 8 times more food if we ate the food directly instead of feeding it to the animal and then eating the animal. It would also, of course, be much healthier for human beings. It's not healthy to eat dead animals. And why does animal agriculture cause climate change? In so many ways. First of all, the cows emit methane, and methane is 120 times worse than carbon dioxide for the atmosphere. It heats up the atmosphere initially at 120 times the rate of carbon dioxide. So the methane coming out of cows is far worse than the carbon dioxide coming out of the tailgate of your car. Second of all, what the cows do is they graze the grass, they reduce the vegetation. Vegetation sequesters carbon dioxide, draws it down from the atmosphere. The cows and the other animals are working against that. Then it degrades the earth. It degrades the earth for a few reasons. One, if the land is overgrazed, you expose the soil, you denude the land, and carbon gets released from the land. But second of all, what ranchers do every year is they set what's known as pasture maintenance fires. There's an image of them on the cover of my book. This is a NASA satellite map, and you see all the red is pasture maintenance fires just on one day. And so these fires spread the desert. Look at the deserts across from the Sahara to China. And you see that the pasture maintenance fires are very much on the border of those deserts. That's part of the way we created those deserts. And when you look at that image, you're probably not surprised. You say, oh yeah, that's where the Sahara is. That's where the deserts of the Middle East are. But you have to ask yourself, why on that vast section of the planet, it's 6,000 miles in width, why do we have deserts there? Did we always have deserts there? We did not. We've had forests on this earth for hundreds of millions of years, but those deserts occurred in the last 10,000 years. Why did that happen? And the answer is, in the last 10,000 years, humans invented agriculture, and they began chopping down trees and setting those pasture maintenance fires and putting goats and cattle onto the land and beginning the practice of animal husbandry. So we created the Sahara, we created the deserts of the Middle East, and nobody believes that we would be able to feed the 7+ billion people on the earth if the earth looked like the Sahara Desert. We can't feed people with land like that. So
I get it. And let me just say this, that you're not the only one trying to get this word out. Let me just show you a couple of things. One, because we're coming up on COP26 in Glasgow, October 31st through November 12th, 2021. This is the next big climate powwow, where the powers that be are going to get together to decide what to do about accelerating climate change in the wake of the horrific fires and floods and drought that we are experiencing globally, as well as particularly in the United States, as you and I are in the United States. There are many, many attempts to wake those powerful people up to the true solution. Look at this. Veg News just announced that Kate Winslet is doing a documentary called Eating Our Way to Extinction. World leaders won't talk about diet change to fight climate change. This is coming out. And so that hopefully, because it involves a celebrity and we live in a celebrity culture, will have an impact. We've got articles in the vegan media We only have 5 years to halt climate change, says UN report. Replacing animal agriculture could help. But, the mainstream media that is watched by thousands and millions of people is advertiser based. And those advertisers are fast food and pharmaceuticals. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to be a newscaster. I was in the business for 40 years to realize, look at who's paying the bills. I better not dive deep into that. Now, Jane Unchained News Network, we also did a documentary about this very subject, interviewing and focusing and profiling Dr. Silas Rao.
People need to know that this is the reality.
What's the problem?
So we have a system that's based on, making money off death, disease, and destruction. It's something that we have never, ever faced before.
The trees are going up in flames.
The Earth is telling us we have to change.
Inside of here is my daughter. I want her to have a good planet to live on, not just a planet to live on, because this planet will survive us.
This affects everything.
That's the only way out that we have. That's the only way out where I see light.
Again, it's the number one thing you can do to reduce climate change.
Yeah, it is historic.
In 20, 30 years, you'll have all our friends hitting us up being like, yo, you're a visionary.
It is a fight against ignorance and apathy.
And Countdown to Year Zero is available on Amazon Prime. I urge everybody to watch it, have some viewing parties to watch it. Boy, we've got so many people commenting. I'm reminded to schedule the interview for you. Okay, thank you. Well, more people need to talk about this. How many holidays are food related? Look, we happen to be talking, you may be watching this at any time, but we're talking on Labor Day. This is Labor Day today. My neighbors had a cookout last night, and they served meat. I smelled it. But how difficult is it to switch from an animal carcass to a Beyond Meat burger? I mean, why is that so difficult? And I'll tell you why. Somebody who is very brilliant talked about carnistic privilege, any privilege, whether it's, sorry, Glenn, white privilege, male privilege, any kind of privilege is something that you don't recognize. I always say it's like body odor. If you got it, you don't know you got it. Somebody else will know you got it. But privilege, all privilege is when you regard a minor inconvenience as a major violation of your rights, right? So this minor, possibly inconvenience, but it's not even an inconvenience. It's just a change. It'll reduce your chance of getting heart disease. I also see people wheeled out with regularity from strokes and heart attacks, taken off and never to return, right outside my window, because cholesterol creates plaque, which creates heart attacks because it blocks the functioning of the arteries to the heart, which is, prior to COVID, our leading killer. So it's better for us. It's better for the planet. Obviously, it's torturous, so it's better for the animals. And yes, the oceans are being decimated a year. Why is it that somebody who clearly, Bill Gates is a smart person, and he said we need to switch to synthetic meat, but he stopped short of saying, you know why? He did network interviews where he talked about switching to synthetic meat, and they attacked him. He was attacked for suggesting that we need to switch to synthetic meat because, again, as Dr. Silas Rao said, our entire economy is based on death, disease, and destruction. Death to the animals, disease for humans. You can't charge for an operation that somebody doesn't need. You can't sell a pill when men don't have erectile dysfunction, which is a precursor to heart disease. You can't sell them that pill. So our entire economy is based on keeping this animal agriculture system going. But here's the question, the provocative question I have for Glen Merzer, who is the author of this brilliant new book that we're discussing, Food is Climate. You can get it right now. I have a link to the Amazon that you can buy it right this second. I've already downloaded it on Kindle. It's brilliant because it encapsulates the solution that could save our planet. We are running out of time. I was just in North Hollywood yesterday. I almost fainted, and it was 5 o'clock. I was going live, and my phone fried. It said emergency, too hot. I couldn't even touch my phone. I mean, we're not going to be able to walk across the street. That's not good for business. These very smart business people are not realizing that if Earth becomes too hot to support human life, hello, dummy, that's not good for business, Glenn.
Yeah, and this is the easiest change we could make. I don't really begin to understand it when people talk about the difficulty of switching to a vegan diet. I did it 30 plus years ago. It was the easiest thing I ever did. All you have to do is do what's best for your own body and eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes and mushrooms. It's the easiest thing in the world. And when you understand, as I think most people now do, how dire the climate crisis is, when it hits 115 degrees in Portland, when a town in Canada hits 121 degrees and then burns down, when we have these horrific storms that are caused by extra energy in the atmosphere and hotter seas, when you realize how dire the crisis is, and then you say, well, then what can we do? And you look at fossil fuels and you say, well, are we going to give up airplanes? Really? Are we going to shut down the airline industry? Are all cars going to go electric by tomorrow? All heating of homes and cooking is going to change overnight? That's not going to happen. But overnight, we can all stop eating meat. We can all start tomorrow being vegans, and what would happen would be that we would all get healthier. So, with the aspects of fossil fuel burning, there are social goods. Airplanes are a social good. They allow people to visit their loved ones, see the world, business to be conducted. There's a social good to airplanes. Now, maybe we should fly less. Maybe there are ways that less fuel can be burned. I don't know, but certainly airlines are a social good. There is no social good to meat, only harms. Pandemics, heart disease, strokes, all kinds of health ailments.
And animal cruelty.
Animal cruelty, less food for human beings, so hunger. It's just one harm after another, and now on top of it, we realize that this is the leading cause of climate change. So there's no reason to eat animals. It's just a negative across the board.
Now, as you were speaking, I ran to my refrigerator. Okay. Beyond Beef. Look, in fact, it's some of these products. This is my fave because I don't want something to taste exactly like meat. I believe Impossible Foods tastes exactly like meat. Sometimes I'm telling the waiter, are you sure this is a vegan burger? Are you sure? But I recently went to a vegan restaurant called Margot's on Montana Avenue in Santa Monica, and they had Impossible sliders. Absolutely delicious. And it was a party, an outdoor party that involved non-vegans, pre-vegans, as I call them. And they were like, this is delicious. Are you sure? Now, here's another one. We're going to be profiling this on Jane Unchained, Lunch Break Live soon. Hooray Foods. Look at this. Does this look like bacon? Yes, it looks exactly like bacon if that's what you need. If you need something to look like bacon, they did it too. Okay, and then this is my personal favorite because I've got a sweet tooth. Okay, there's a zillion different brands of vegan ice cream and gelato. Okay, so there's this idea, even Burger King, and here's the McDonald's plant lettuce and tomato I mean, this is irrational. The clock is ticking. We are barreling toward a climate. We're in the midst of a climate crisis. Look what's happening in Louisiana. Look what's happening in Belgium, in Germany, in India, these floods. I mean, the fires, I have friends who've had to evacuate their elderly relatives from Lake Tahoe.
Right. That's why we have to do the easy thing first. And the easy thing is to eat human food. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and mushrooms. That's human food. And you eat human food, you get healthier, you save the planet. There is no solution to the climate crisis without humans transitioning to eating human food. Because even if you made all the cars electric tomorrow, even if nobody flew in an airplane tomorrow, we would still be accumulating greenhouse gases in the atmosphere from animal agriculture. So we need to end animal agriculture, reforest the earth. We need 1 trillion more trees on the earth, and we need to protect the oceans. Very importantly, we need to protect the whales, protect the dolphins, protect the fish, and have a more robust phytoplankton population. The phytoplankton, we don't see them, but if they're healthy, they will sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they emit a chemical called dimethyl sulfide that rises in the atmosphere, bonds with water vapor, and seeds clouds. The clouds
We are
cool the earth.
talking, I want to re-emphasize, we're talking to the author of Food is Climate, a response to Al Gore, Bill Gates, Paul Hawken, and the conventional narrative on climate change. Now, so many people are trying to get this word out. I think your book is great because it encapsulates it. I think every leader should get a copy of your book. I'd like to start a campaign where we start delivering this to newscasters, TV hosts, opinion writers. We need that. We need every single one of them to get this book. There's also a movement called the Plant-Based Treaty, which just launched.
Yes.
You can go to the plantbasedtreaty.org, plantbasedtreaty.org, and sign up. And that is another way that we are urging corporations and governments, local, state, federal, and international bodies like the UN, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to look at this ginormous, I don't like to say elephant in the room. I think that's speciesist. We need to come up with an alternative for that phrase. But this is the solution that is staring us right in the face that we refuse to look at in our carnistic entitlement and privilege and arrogance. And I think there's an addictive component as well. I think that meat and dairy is an addiction that is perpetrated by advertising. And I sometimes can't even watch television because the commercials with the sexualization of meat, the dripping, and all of, they know what they're doing. One of the reasons I believe that I come from an advertising background, it's brainwashing. Okay, they know how to do it.
I don't even believe that the meat tastes good. You know, I haven't had meat in 48 years, I think it is now. But it, you know, they spread sauces on it and salt and sugar, and that's what I think people are addicted to. If you boiled meat and ate it, I don't think anybody would eat it.
Of course. I mean, if we were carnivores, if we saw roadkill on the side of the street, we'd salivate, we'd pull over, and we'd want to eat it. Just like when our dogs see roadkill, not that they're carnivores, they're omnivores, but they salivate. They want that. Even if it's a few days old, somebody's left a piece of chicken on the street, you know how your dogs will jump and try to get it. So, well, I want to get back, though, to the core issue. We can discuss veganism all day. Your book makes a central argument. Again, boil it down so that those who may have not connected the dots, because so many people talk about we need to give up meat and dairy for the climate, but they don't connect the dots. So people are not really understanding. The meat and dairy industry has reduced this whole issue to a joke, cow farts, and it's not about that. Just the manure that these 80 billion farm animals produce every year. Iowa is dealing, one of the largest, if not the largest agricultural state in the nation, is dealing with a crisis. They have so many factory farms that the manure being produced in Iowa is literally, they are drowning in it, almost literally. Their creeks and their rivers are becoming just bleep holes. Okay. And that's an agricultural state. They're rising up and saying no more concentrated animal feeding operations. They're trying to stop a new one near a creek. And I was asked to participate. We did a whole interview on that. That's Iowa. We're not talking about people living in Venice, California, or Brooklyn, New York, who were beating their chest about it. These are people in the agricultural industry that are saying enough. It's too much. We're only approximately 8 billion humans. Okay, there's enough food to feed everybody. We are raising and killing, and in the interim, torturing 80 billion farm animals, cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, goats, and lambs every year.
Right.
So that is the issue, but people still don't connect the dots, and they laugh about cow farts. You are the author of Food is Climate. We urge everybody, get this book. You can download it on Kindle. You can order it and have a paperback sent to you. And I'd like to see you do an audiobook ASAP, Glenn, because that's how—
There will be an audiobook in about a month.
Okay, good, because that's the latest thing. People, I know, I listen to books now. But spell it out. You do your elevator pitch. You've got 2 minutes.
Real estate agents, Jane, will say location, location, location. The problem with climate change is land use, land use, land use. It's what we're doing with the earth. And you just have to look at how human beings are using the earth. 70% of the earth are oceans. They are dying. And why are they dying? Several causes. Certainly plastics aren't good for them. Certainly cruise lines aren't ideal. But the most important reason why the oceans are dying is industrial fishing. We are trawling the bottom of the oceans. We are removing all life from the sea. We're disturbing the sediment at the bottom of the oceans that's acidifying the oceans. We're killing whales accidentally, and in some cases even on purpose. And when I say accidentally, it's because they have traps for lobsters, and the ropes go to the top of the ocean and sometimes trap the whales. So 70% of the earth is ocean, and we're destroying it mainly in order to eat fish. So if we didn't eat fish, we could save the oceans, and the oceans can go a long way to healing the planet. Then you look at the land. More than 1/3 of the non-ice land surface of the earth is used for grazing. The grazing destroys the atmosphere. It destroys it in a number of ways. The cows belch methane. Methane is 120 times worse than carbon dioxide. The grazing destroys the soil. The soil holds a great amount of carbon. And we set pasture maintenance fires. Again, every year, these pasture maintenance fires send carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and they destroy the soil. And then the animal respiration adds carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. So for all these reasons and more, nitrous oxide, which is 300 times as bad as carbon dioxide. Nitrous oxide is the result of both animal waste and also the nitrogen fertilizer that we use to grow food to feed to animals. So if we didn't grow food to feed to animals in order to eat the animals stupidly, and if we didn't have animals grazing more than 1/3 of the Earth's surface, if we rewilded 1/3 of the Earth's surface and let the forest come back, we don't even have to plant the trees, they'll plant themselves. If we let the forest come back, let the vegetation come back on 1/3 of the Earth's surface, and then we leave the oceans alone, 70% of the Earth's surface, that's more than 80% of the Earth's surface that can be restored and can heal, can draw down carbon. And unless you're drawing down carbon, you're not solving the problem, because when you put solar panels on the roof, as good as they may be, they don't draw down carbon dioxide. They merely reduce the rate at which you're adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere.
So what do we do to, again, cop this next event coming up very soon. We're talking to the author of Food is Climate, a response to Al Gore, Bill Gates, Paul Hawken, and the conventional narrative on climate change. COP26, which is the UN and the international bodies' next big climate powwow, is coming up October 31st. And yet, I think there's even a battle to tell these people don't serve meat at the conference.
Well, we're hoping to hand out this book. We're hoping to hand out this book.
Greta Thunberg, who is a vegan, has publicly urged these so-called climate gurus to stop eating animals and stop eating them at their conferences. You had Joaquin Phoenix, who got the Hollywood Awards ceremonies to have plant-based dishes. You have the Met Gala, which is the pinnacle of society, the fanciest gala in the world ever, going completely 100% plant-based this year. I believe it's thanks to Billie Eilish, who is vegan, becoming the co-chair. You have the best restaurant in the world, 11 Madison Park, switching to a 100% plant-based menu. You have Epicurious, one of the top food websites, going plant-based. Why is it that I know it looks like I'm ready to pull out my hair, because I am. It's like it's as Dr. Silas Rouse says, when is the bubble going to burst? When is this truth going to break through? And the resistance of people who don't want to change their lifestyle, and those who see the dollar signs. And by the way, the dollar signs are going to a tiny percentage of people. The farmers are in heavy debt. They're rising up and saying, hey, we're living like indentured servants. As Dr. Rouse says, they're factory farming the farmers too. They're factory farming the consumers. We're all part of this system designed to get people very sick and then make money off the pharmaceutical industry, and also have them eating this food that is destroying them and destroying the planet. I just don't understand why this message, considering that we only have a few years left before these feedback loops cause irreparable harm that cannot be reversed, like the climate bomb. When the ice caps melt, it's going to release a climate bomb that's going to have more carbon than there's no way for it to even be quantified. And yet, as we barrel toward extinction of species, as we barrel toward destroying all the habitat, as we barrel toward irreversible climate change, as we deal with floods and drought and fires that are right at our door or even engulfing our homes, this straightforward solution is being ignored. Glenn.
Well, we have a few things that are going in our direction now. Silas Rouse's paper has been published by the Journal of Ecological Society. Forbes magazine, of all the publications in the world, Forbes magazine published an article in which his paper was mentioned and these issues were mentioned. And now we have my book as a tool. And yes, we're going to give out this book at the Glasgow conference. Sales of the book will help us do that. So I hope everyone will read the book, and I hope people will talk about it, and I hope people will challenge their politicians and policymakers with the arguments they learn from reading this book. You mentioned the new documentary with Kate Winslet. So we have a number of things that are giving us momentum, and I don't think we're going to be as ignored in Glasgow as we've been ignored in previous climate summits. We'll see what happens, but we're going to make our case in Glasgow.
Look, your book is a paperback. Last time I checked, it was under $10.
Yes.
For $100, you can buy 10 copies of this book and give them out to the most influential people you know. This is why, with the documentary we produced, Countdown to Year Zero, which talks about this very issue, and it's available now on Amazon Prime, you can watch it. I submitted to every single film festival I possibly can. We've been accepted and we've won some awards, but I do it because people who look at films in film festivals are influencers, and it's forcing them to watch the film and then see this information, because denial is a very powerful thing. When you don't want to see something, you don't want to hear it, people can be screaming it right in your face. But then, as they say, the day you're ready to hear something, you can go down and get your hair cut, and your hairdresser is going to tell you what you need to hear when you're ready to hear it. And so, is the human race ready to hear this? This is the fundamental question. And if not, when will the human race be ready to hear it? And this woman is asking, Elizabeth, can you think of a way to step into a more veganic lifestyle for yourself? Perhaps ask the question those of us who are already vegan need to ask. Look, let me say this. We can become like a very exclusive club where we are so pure, which none of us are, that we set impossible standards. That's not what I feel is the answer. I'm personally not against cell-based meat. Just dog food. If American dogs and cats were its own nation, they'd be like the 5th largest animal consuming country in the world. I think it's going to be a challenge to get all those people to feed their dogs vegan dog food, although there's incredible vegan dog food that we profile all the time. We have a whole series of articles on Jane Unchained about it, whether it's Wild Earth, V-Dog, and I don't want to leave anybody out, Bramble, and then there's cell-based meat. I'd like to ask you about that, because I'm not opposed to cell-based meat. In fact, we did an interview with a manufacturer who is about to come out with a cat treat that is a mouse-based, cell-based meat. And the mice were rescued from a laboratory. They took the cells. The mice are still living in a beautiful sanctuary, and it's a brewing process where you need a couple of molecules once, and you never need to go back to the animal again. And so if that could be replicated, obviously that could save a lot of animals' lives, but I know it's controversial within the vegan community. So I'd like to ask you that provocative question. How do you feel about cell-based meat?
I don't have any strong opinions on it. I wouldn't eat it myself, but I would.
Me neither.
I would certainly say that it would seem to not be a question of animal cruelty. So at least it would reduce animal cruelty if people had cell-based meat. I imagine that it would be a little less unhealthy than regular meat, because it wouldn't have it wouldn't cause the inflammation, because as much inflammation, because it wouldn't be filthy. Like, when meat comes from a slaughterhouse, it's filthy. It's full of bacteria, and I would imagine that the cell-based meat wouldn't be filthy.
Right. And not only that, but the hormones and the antibiotics that they put into animals, which are supposed to pass through their system and don't, that would be eliminated. They wouldn't need growth hormones or antibiotics, because animals are kept in such horrific conditions. If they didn't have antibiotics, they would die en masse. Tom asks, could you please explain why Al Gore never mentioned animal agriculture in any of his global warming speeches? Excellent question. And
excellent
I know
question, and there's no good answer to it. He should mention it. He doesn't. I don't know his motivations. I don't know if he's actually deluded on this question, or more likely, it's the vestigial instincts of a politician. He may feel that he doesn't want to be attacked for challenging our boneheaded food culture in which people eat so many animal products. I heard Al Gore speak to climate activists a couple months ago, and he was celebrating something called regenerative animal agriculture, which is nothing but a hoax. It's the idea that if you rotate animals from paddock to paddock, and you treat them kindly and they're grass-fed, that somehow that's healthy for the environment. It isn't. Actually, it will cause more global warming than even cattle in confined animal feeding operations, because the cattle will be belching more methane and living a little bit longer, and that creates even more methane, and So while the cattle may suffer less cruelty during their lives, they will then be shipped off to the same slaughterhouses, and eating it will be just as unhealthy as eating meat from a confined animal feeding operation.
Now, Paula Franklin says, I think Al Gore owned cattle ranches. He has some kind of cattle in his background, maybe his family, something like that.
I think that's true.
Yeah, I know Moby, when Al Gore was doing his online, environmental day event, and I saw this with my own eyes, Moby went on to perform and tried to bring up animal agriculture, and Al Gore shot him down. Was like, well, it's less than that. Play. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, the resistance, the hostility toward this, it kind of reminds me of people who are in a disease like alcoholism. And I speak as somebody who's recovering. You're always recovering. All we have is today, 26 years sober. But until I got sober, you could talk to me till you were blue in the face. I didn't want to hear what you were saying. Then when I hit bottom, I was able to hear, and I had a moment of clarity. When are we as a global culture going to have a moment of clarity on this? Or let me ask you alternately, if we don't wake up to this issue, how long before our planet becomes completely unlivable?
I fear that it's sooner than the experts have been telling us. I mean, we're getting such terrible heat waves and such terrible storms. The problem is human arrogance. When you don't know exactly, and we won't be able to predict exactly when the Earth will no longer be habitable. We can't predict exactly, will it be in 15 years, in 25 years, in 50 years, in 100 years? So when you don't know that for sure, wouldn't the decent thing to do to protect the future be to do everything you can to be conservative in the sense of conservation, to be conservative and say, okay, let's immediately do everything we can. Let's have an international moratorium on fishing. Let's protect the oceans. Let's stop having 80 billion farmed animals. Let's stop eating animals. And then we can work slowly on reducing airplanes and transitioning cars to electric and trucks to electric and doing what we can. But let's do the simple thing first. The simple thing is we stop eating animals, we get healthy. That would even revive the economy when people get healthier and we don't have to spend 18% of our gross national product on health care. You don't have to take medications. I don't take any medications. I don't believe I'll ever need to. And so, let's do the easy thing first and be conservative in the sense of conserving the planet. And we should start that today.
Now, let me ask you what I see as the possible end game, because I sit here and somehow I'm on lists where I get constant farm articles, which I read because I'm very involved with the Rancher Advocacy Program. We co-host summits with the Rowdy Girl Sanctuary, a Texas cattle ranch turned into a vegan animal sanctuary run by Renee King Sonnen. And we transition, we try to help and offer strategies and discuss strategies for transitioning farmers and ranchers who want out of animal agriculture. There are many of them, but they're seeking a way out. And it's a very challenging process because the system is not set up. It's not designed to help them. And the governments are pretty much controlled by the meat and dairy industry. The USDA in the United States is run by Tom Vilsack, who's a former dairy industry trade group leader. The Interior Department is run by the meat and dairy industry. The National Institutes of Health is pretty much run by the same larger cabal, you might say, of meat, dairy, pharmaceutical, big ag, industrial complex. So it's very hard for farmers. They can be blackballed if people find out they want to get out of animal agriculture. But here's something that I've started to see. There was an article in the Sacramento Bee about a woman who was a dairy farmer who, even though she loves her animals, had to start liquidating her cows because of the drought, that it's making it much harder to feed them. The grazing areas are not producing the amount of food for the animals. And I don't want to misstate it. The bottom line is, because of the drought, she's said she's had to start liquidating some of her cows. And then I started seeing this in other states, article after article, farmers having to sell half their herd because of the drought. Then you have the water issue. We know that a vegan diet saves 600 gallons of water per person per day. That's not me talking, that's National Geographic. So you have drought, you have crop failures as a result of the heat, you have water shortages.
Right.
Could it be that nature's end game is, hey, human race, you can either drink the water yourself or you can give it to 80 billion animals, but you can't do both?
Right. And so the answer stares us in the face. We have to stop this stupidity of wasting all our resources to grow animals, to torture animals, to eat animals, to give ourselves heart attacks and strokes. It's just insanity. And so, the climate crisis is forcing us to face these facts. We should have faced them long ago just with the health crisis in America and the obesity crisis. But let's let at least the ability to breathe be a factor here. We're not going to be able to breathe on this earth for too much longer if we keep going with animal agriculture. So animal agriculture.
But I want to get back to my point. My point is, and I wish I had the articles to whip out, but whereas the temperature is getting hotter, whereas an IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reviewer by the name of Dr. Peter Carter said, as the temperatures increase, one thing that they're not really accounting for or trying to avoid or anticipating is massive crop failures. Okay? Whereas the drought and the increased temperatures are also creating water shortages. There's a lot of articles about that. Whereas all those whereases, wherefore, are people going to, just like the farmers are saying, oh, we got to get rid of our cows. We can't afford to feed them. There's no water for them to drink. I mean,
Right.
is it going to boil down to that? In addiction, there's something called a high bottom and a low bottom. Your high bottom is you hit bottom when you make a fool of yourself at a party, as I did, but you still have the house, the car, the job, the relationship. A low bottom is when none of that works. You're not just making a fool of yourself at a party, you're driving the wrong way down the freeway, killing people, and you end up in prison or dead. That's a low bottom. Yeah. So as a global culture, as a human species, we are clearly not a high bottom. But how low do we have to go before we hit bottom on animal agriculture?
Well, I think we're hitting a low bottom when the temperature goes to 115 in Portland, Oregon, and goes to 95 degrees in Bozeman, Montana, and goes to 121 degrees in Lytton, Canada. So I think we're hitting the low bottom, and we're seeing these storms, and we simply have to stop now. And the cattle ranchers who are getting out of the business because of the drought, well, it's the drought that was caused by the cattle ranchers. So they've already altered the climate to the point where they have to get out of the business. So that's called karma, I believe. And so, I'm hoping that it's not too late. I don't think it is too late. But the only way we solve this problem is to recognize that the leading cause of climate change is animal agriculture. And the thing we have to look to is land use. We have to free up all the grazing land and rewild it, and we have to protect the oceans. And the way we do that is not to wait for politicians. They will never lead. The people have to lead. And for those who may think that this solution, the vegan solution, is unrealistic, remember, animal agriculture is such a fragile industry financially that if 20%, 30%, 40% of Americans go vegan, animal agriculture will fold in this country. And then we'll get to 50%, 60%, 90%, and I hope 100% vegan. So what we have to do is all go vegan, get our friends to go vegan, even if people wouldn't do it in the past for their own health, even if they wouldn't do it in the past because of animal cruelty. I hope they will at least realize that it's in humanity's interest to do it now so that we can all breathe. Because now, as I say in the book, it used to be an argument between meat eaters and vegans, in which vegans would talk about animal cruelty and meat eaters would say, yes, but my pork is so delicious. And if that was the way they felt, it was hard to get them to change. But now they have to realize that their pork, their hamburger, is preventing all of us from being able to breathe. And so I hope that that will make people rethink eating animals.
And when we have, even McDonald's has been test marketing this. Please, McDonald's, bring it on already. Okay, please. But you have Burger King that has a vegan burger. We just profiled Panda Express with an absolutely delicious vegan chicken that sold out. It was test marketed, and we went live on Jane Unchained, and people started saying, I went and it sold out. Yes, it sold out. So put it nationwide. Yeah. And as far as like Starbucks, it's trying to get better, but at a very slow pace. I mean, they call themselves a progressive company. I was in Zurich, Switzerland. There was a Starbucks across from my hotel. I went in. They had the most delicious falafel. I grabbed the last one. The guy behind the counter said, oh, they sell out immediately. They know how to make a delicious, easy to make vegan dish that could be selling out like a falafel. It should be across the country. Yes. These companies have to be pressured as well. I mean, frankly, the companies are doing better than the government. The U.S. government continues to subsidize animal agriculture. And I think that's one of the biggest problems because, you know, there are some who say that the dairy industry would have collapsed already if it weren't for the government programs, not only the checkoff programs that try to encourage people to have dairy, but also buying it up, keeping cheese in cheese case, selling it to students and prisoners. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, the government is on the wrong side of this issue. The government is subsidizing animal agriculture, and without those subsidies, animal agriculture would have a hard time surviving. So, you know, I advocate for a number of solutions. I would love to see taxes on animal foods. I would love to see laws that prevented animal cruelty. But at very least, can't we just ask our politicians to stop subsidizing the industry that's killing Americans, torturing animals, and is causing climate change? At very least, let's get out of the way, stop subsidizing this industry that's causing so much harm.
So the administration, and this is a bipartisan issue, okay? Both parties are really horrible on this issue, just as the conservative networks and the liberal networks are both horrible on this issue, not talking about it when they talk about climate change, talking exclusively about fossil fuels, ignoring the methane and the nitrous oxide from animal agriculture, ignoring the intense inefficiency of a system that produces 80 billion animals that eat a huge percentage of the Earth's food when children are dying of hunger and malnutrition. So we've got this system where everybody's got their blinders on and not looking at this issue. The solution is there in your book. How do we get the Biden administration, for example, which is the administration in power now, which put Tom Vilsack, who was also the USDA chief, the United States Department of Agriculture leader under the Obama administration. How do we get Biden, who talks about we got to solve climate change all the time, to look at the issue raised in your book, Food is Climate?
I don't know how we get Biden on our side, and I don't hold out too much hope that we will. I don't hold out too much hope that politicians will lead the way. And so I don't want to discourage anyone from trying. If anyone wants to, people should write op-ed articles and send letters and do whatever they can. But I think that the real hope is that human beings lead this, just grassroots. If people go vegan and stop buying animal foods, animal agriculture will fold. and the politicians will follow. Right now, you have to understand that if you were running for United States Senate and you cared about a lot of issues, minimum wage and any other issues that you care about, health insurance and so forth. And if you were running for U.S. Senate and you said we must end animal agriculture, you'd be taking a big risk that you wouldn't get elected. And so you have to understand that politicians are afraid to lead. And we can't even necessarily blame them for that, because there are a lot of other important issues that they may care about and they may be on the right side of. But they can't afford to be on the right side of this issue, or so they think. So
look,
people have to.
Let me jump in and say, Michelle Obama tried to talk about this, getting kids to eat their fruits and vegetables. Remember when she created a vegetable garden?
Yeah, but if she was asked what's her favorite food to eat, yeah.
Hold on one second.
Yeah.
They made her change it. She somehow, all of a sudden, it was let's move. Yeah. Okay, it went from eating fruits and vegetables to let's move. Okay, right. Coincidence?
No.
Go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, and also, if Michelle Obama is not a vegan, and if you asked her what her most favorite food is, she may name, and I've heard her do this, some food with animals in it. Yeah. So, it was good for her to promote gardening and eating fruits and vegetables. But of course, she never went all the way and said, don't eat meat, don't eat dairy. Nobody in the Obama administration did that. And they just weren't part of our movement.
Now, we have Cory Booker, who was a presidential candidate, who's a New Jersey senator, who's vegan. He's very upfront about it. He apparently may have talked to Vice President Kamala Harris. She went to a vegan restaurant in Las Vegas and said she was dabbling in veganism. This is according to the published reports, and was trying to be vegan before 6. So we also have, I believe, Adam Schiff is a vegan. There's other vegans in Congress. So there is a minuscule amount of people who may get it. The Farm Bill is coming up in 2023. And we only have a couple of seconds left here, but I feel that that's one of the most important sort of turning points, either positively or negatively. The Farm Bill provides many, 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 many billions of dollars in subsidies to the animal agriculture industry. When it comes up for renewal in 2023, that's going to determine whether we survive as a species or not. Okay, as that Farm Bill goes, so goes the entire world, as far as I'm concerned, because if those billions and billions and billions of dollars remain in place for animal agriculture, then, it's game, set, match in a bad way. Now, there is something that I'm involved in called the Agriculture Fairness Alliance, and they lobby. They have lobbyists going through the halls of Capitol Hill to tell the story that you are telling in your book. Okay, I feel like we should have your book distributed all through the Congress. I mean, thousands of books handed out to the staffers, because working with the Agriculture Fairness Alliance, and I'm one of the quote unquote champions, we started a program. If you give $200 a month, which is not tax deductible because it's a political thing, you can be part of this group. We're still trying to get 50 people to give $200 a month to hire a second lobbyist to go in there and tell the story. But the first lobbyist is doing very, very good communication with staffers who he says are open to this message. The staffers, some of them have kids who are vegan. Some of them are veganish. Some of them are vegan. Some of them want information. They're actually there to do some good. So I would urge everybody to get involved with the Agriculture Fairness Alliance and become a champion if you can. I can't think of anything better. Listen, when I heard what they're doing and I realized the crucial importance of the Farm Bill, I said there's no more important thing to spend money on than to get this message into the halls of Congress so that they don't catastrophically continue these subsidies and basically spell the end of the world. It doesn't matter what money you have if life is uninhabitable, it's all meaningless. I mean, So I urge everybody, Agriculture Fairness Alliance, you can just go on, Google Agriculture Fairness Alliance, along with buying this book that we're talking about, Food is Climate. And maybe we can work together to have this book distributed in Congress. But I would like to see that. These people, what I've learned working with them is that staffers make a lot of the decisions. They read a lot of the research. Then they make recommendations. If we could hit some of the staffers of these members of Congress and explain to them exactly what we're talking about now, and give them this book, give them a packet of literature for them to read, maybe that would have an impact. I mean, I can't imagine anybody who is saying, who hears this, and unless they think, oh, well, it can't be true because we're not seeing it on the news. The news isn't telling you because it's advertiser based. The advertisers pay the bill. They control the show. I was in the news media for 38 years. I've been behind the curtain. I know how it works. Right. Okay? They will not discuss this. I'll give you an example. During not this past hurricane, but one of the other previous hurricanes that devastated the South, and there were so many concentrated animal feeding operations where the animals were locked up inside these giant warehouses and drowned because they didn't want the images of carcasses floating, which they had experienced in previous floods. They said, we're going to keep them all locked up. So all these hundreds of thousands of animals dying. Can you imagine? You've lived your life in a warehouse with no windows, and now you're going to drown in that warehouse. And the U.S. government treats it as live inventory, and they replace the live inventory. We haven't even gotten to the moral bankruptcy that this system is. I mean, it's moral bankruptcy. It's reprehensible. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. And so we held a news conference. When I say we, a group of us got together, various organizations, and said, we have to say no more concentrated animal feeding operations, these giant factory farms in this area. The news media came. They were on the steps of a city hall in the South, videotaped it, never ran. None of the stations ran the video. What they did run were barbecues for the victims of the storm. Huh. That tells you everything you need to know. The news media is not going to tell this story. That's why I started Jane Unchained. That's why you and I are having this conversation. It amounts to, in repressive regimes where people would print things up secretly and hand them out at the risk of their lives, little and pamphlets. That's where we're at right now, getting this information out. This is the equivalent of a little pamphlet being handed out in a back in the Soviet era, where people were trying to get information out about freedom, okay, right, or any repressive regime. Right. This is where we're at, and the good news, I believe, is that kids aren't watching television. Okay, they do not watch. They don't want to. Everything's on this. So this is why I say the most powerful tool you have is your phone. Go on Instagram, go on Facebook, go on TikTok. Tell this story any way you can, whether it's photographing a meal, going live at a veg fest or a vegan restaurant, as I did yesterday. I mean, get the word out. We cannot afford at this moment in crisis to say, oh, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on social media. Forget about it. This is the conduit that we can get the word out. And we are desperately pleading with people to do the sensible thing and see the connection between food and climate. All right, we're out of time. I could talk to you forever, Glenn. You're so inspiring. So your audiobook is going to be available soon, I hope.
Yes, in about a month.
Okay, and people can buy the book. It's on Amazon. I put the link into the intro of this video. We've got to get the decision makers absorbing this information. We should talk about creating a program where thousands of copies are distributed.
I would love it.
Yes. All right. Okay, everybody, share out this video, get the book, and together we can do it. We can do it.
Thank you, Jane.
Yes, thank you.